Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and welcome to the Black Belt Leadership Podcast, where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own unique Black Belt leader within. Hey, I want to open this week's podcast with a question, and that question is this: Can you name the seven original wonders of the ancient world? I promise you, I had to do a little bit of homework on this one, but here they are: the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the Colossus of Rhodes, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, and the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now, out of all of these seven original ancient wonders, only one remains, and that's going to be the topic of today's Black Belt Leadership Podcast. So I want to title today's lesson Big, Bigger, Biggest, and I want to share with you some leadership insights from Khufu's pyramid. So let's jump right in and let's get started. You know, history tells us that the very first Egyptian step pyramids were single layer tombs. They were called mastabas. Now, builders began stacking smaller mastabas one on top of another with the goal of making a grander monument for their rulers. Now, the original step pyramids were built like a staircase. They served as a symbolic pathway to the heavens for the pharaoh, but they also provided structural stability. Now, the step pyramid, also known as the Pyramid of Djoser, is considered the oldest pyramid in all of Egypt. It was built during Egypt's third dynasty, and it was designed by the famous royal architect Imhotep. Now, Imhotep is credited with pioneering large-scale stone architecture. The step pyramid itself features a unique seven-tier, four-sided shape, rising 203 feet in the air, and it spans roughly 3.2 acres in size. I can tell you, it's big. Now, the second tallest and the second largest of the ancient Egyptian pyramids is the tomb of Pharaoh Khafre. This is the Pyramid of Khafre. With a volume of more than 2.2 million cubic meters, rising 471 feet into the sky, this ancient pyramid was constructed on the Giza Plateau very near the Great Pyramid. Now, Khafre built his pyramid on a layer of bedrock 33 feet higher than his father's pyramid, so it gives the visual impression that his pyramid is actually taller than his dad's. The base of the Pyramid of Khafre spans more than 706 feet. It required more than 1.9 million stones, and it took more than 20 years to complete. It's bigger. But standing 481 feet tall, spanning 592,000 square feet at its base, the Great Pyramid of Giza is the only surviving of the original seven wonders of the ancient world. Its footprint expands for more than 13 acres. Now, that's roughly the size of 10 football fields. It has a volume of more than 2.6 million cubic meters, and it weighs in excess of 6 million tons. Now, Khufu's pyramid utilized more than 2.4 million stone blocks, and they were quarried and painstakingly stacked over a period of about 26 years. Now, the Great Pyramid has a square base that's almost perfectly aligned with the north, the south, the east, and the west, with a deviation of less than 7/100th of a degree. Now, this level of precision rivals anything in modern history. And get this, they achieved that level of perfection with no modern technology, no electricity, and no magnetic compasses. But for more than 3,800 years, the Great Pyramid stood as the world's tallest man-made structure. And in 1311 AD, the 525-foot Lincoln Cathedral in England, with the completion of its central spire, became the very first man-made structure to exceed the height of the Great Pyramid. But when it comes to Egyptian pyramids, the Great Pyramid at Giza is the biggest. Now, what I find unique about each and every one of these massive structures is that every single one of them began the same way. It began as a thought or an idea. You know, the pharaohs that envisioned them and the builders that built them used their imagination to envision something that had never been created. They put their idea on paper, and then they set out to bring what they put on paper into its physical representation. So today, their imagination remains on display as we take a look at the Great Pyramid of Giza. And by the same fashion, leaders don't accomplish big things just because they have big resources. Leaders accomplish big things because they first developed the quality of thinking big. I want you to think about this. The size of your thinking is going to determine the size of your future. So let me ask you a question. What's the biggest thing you've ever envisioned, dreamed about, had an idea about? Now, I'm not talking about what you may have accomplished up to this point, but what is it that you've ever thought, or maybe you've wondered what might be possible? Was it a big idea? Was it a bigger idea? Or was it the biggest idea that you could ever imagine? Now, sadly, for most people, they stop dreaming long before they stop living. And once they stop dreaming, the idea of building big and doing big things dies with their dreams. Now, one of my favorite books on big thinking is Dave Schwartz's classic book, The Magic of Thinking Big. Still available on Amazon, and if you don't have it in your library, you need to add it. Now, the main point of Dr. Schwartz that he makes in this book is this: your success in life is going to be determined by three things. Number one, the size of your thinking. Number two, your belief in yourself. And number three, your willingness to take bold action rather than simply relying on innate talent, ability, or luck. Now, Dr. Schwartz goes on to highlight four primary excuses that all of us make that limit our success. It could be our health. Well, I don't feel well enough. It could be our intelligence. I don't think I'm smart enough. It could be our age. I'm too young or I'm too old. Or it could be luck. I'm just not lucky. Now, the sad part is the lies we tell ourselves ultimately become the truths we believe, and that only holds us back from rising to your full potential. Now, you got to remember, as you think, you say, you do, and you become. And if you only think small things, you're only going to be capable of saying and doing small things. Now, far too many leaders limit their goals to what they believe is available. They base their belief on their past experience, their prior wins, their prior losses, their current resources, the current economic outlook, and the current people and identity that they have. And as a result, they find themselves anchored to the past, only thinking about the present. They're not engaged in forward, visionary thinking. Very simply put, they're not thinking big. Now, an anchor can keep a ship safe, but an anchor has never discovered a new world. But how many leaders remain anchored to yesterday's successes and yesterday's failures? How many leaders allow yesterday's methods to dictate how they're going to show up today? And how many leaders use yesterday's assumption as a basis for simply doing more of the same and wondering why nothing changes? You know, it's no wonder many leaders today struggle to think bigger. I believe it's because they're stuck in the thinking of the past. Now, what I find interesting is we go back and we look through history. Khufu didn't build his pyramid to protect the past. He built his pyramid so he could do one thing: to ascend to the stars and become a living God. In his dream, in his idea of the future, he thought about what was next. So Khufu, Khafre, and all of the other pharaohs of Egypt who built elaborate pyramids or elaborate tombs, every single one of them was imagining something bigger for tomorrow. And as they imagined something bigger, they built accordingly. Well, one of the things I admire about a leader is the fact that a leader doesn't just see the world as it is. A leader sees the world as it is, but they also see the world as it could be. You know, Thomas Edison imagined a world that could be illuminated by an incandescent light bulb that was powered by electricity. Henry Ford envisioned a world where a motorized vehicle could transport people and equipment much more efficiently than a horse-drawn wagon. Jonas Salk dreamed of a world where children would no longer be stricken by the crippling effects of polio. These individuals, they dream big. Now, what about President Kennedy? John Kennedy imagined a world where men would walk on the moon. Well, NASA acted on that dream and they made it happen in 1969. John Blankenberger envisioned a world with a computer on every desk, and he created the first commercially available personal computer, the Kenback One, in 1971. Now, Martin Cooper was an engineer at Motorola, and he imagined a world where telephones were cordless. And he introduced the Dynatac handheld phone in 1973. These individuals, they didn't just dream, they dreamed bigger. Now, building on the pioneering work of James McEwen, Jeff Oshlick, and Dr. Brian Day, Intuitive Surgical introduced the Da Vinci system. This revolutionized the world of robotic surgery. And I can tell you that surgical procedure literally saved my life. Sam Altman built upon the groundbreaking idea of artificial intelligence. Now, this was first espoused by John McCarthy, Alan Turing, and Marvin Minsky all the way back in the 1950s. Altman went on to launch ChatGPT November 2022. And Elon Musk, what's he done? He built upon the successes of the NASA space program. He launched SpaceLink in 2006 and Starlink in 2019. These individuals didn't just dream, they dreamed even bigger. Now, what each of these visionary leaders did is they went beyond just asking the question, what is, and they started to consider, what if? But what I love about these leaders is the fact that they went one step further and they asked themselves an even more consequential question, why not? You know, for more than a decade, Gilligan's Island brought us the continual saga of a group of tourists who were caught in a storm, they were driven off course, and they were shipwrecked on an uncharted tropical island. And you know the crew, the first mate Gilligan, along with the skipper, the professor, the millionaire and his wife, the movie star, and a beautiful girl from the Midwest. They all brought a little bit of humor into our lives every single week as they failed time and time again to escape that tropical island. But eventually, they made it back to civilization. Now, I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine waking up to find yourself living on an island in the middle of the Pacific. Every single day, you're hanging out with the same people. You're going through the same routine. You're having the same conversations every single day. So over time, what happens? You and everybody else on the island, you simply settle into doing more of the same day after day after day. This small island becomes your little world. Now, why do I have you envision that story? Because this is the limiting mindset that many of us bring to our lives every single day. Far too many people in the world, without even realizing, have sequestered themselves on the island of limited thinking. They don't realize that the comfort of the familiar has become the confinement of their potential. But when we face no challenge, when we stop being curious, when we cease to grow ourselves, we're ultimately shipwrecking our future. So that begs the question, okay, John, what's the solution? Well, to me, it's pretty simple. Go read a book. Go listen to a podcast. Go attend a seminar or a conference. Go hire a mentor or a coach. Attempt to do something that you've never done before, knowing you're probably going to fail the first time, but you're going to learn something from the experience. I want to challenge you to stop quitting at what if and proceed to asking yourself, why not? And then take an uncomfortable step in that direction. Now I want you to think about it. You're only one book. You're only one conversation. You're only one conference, one podcast, one mentor, or one idea from experiencing something big or even bigger in your life. But you got to remember, like the pharaohs of Egypt, you got to transform that idea that you're dreaming into its physical representation. And that means you got to take action on your dream. Now, personal growth is much more than simply the acquiring of information. And I can tell you this, reading a book won't change your life, but acting on what you glean from the pages, that will. Attending a seminar, attending a conference, and even if you take great notes, that's not going to make you more successful. But if you act on what you've learned and what you experienced at the conference, those things can. Now, knowledge is potential energy. Wisdom, which I define as the right use of knowledge, is kinetic energy. And it's the actual use of knowledge and putting into application, that's where transformation in your life takes place. You got to remember that information can fill a notebook, but only application can transform your life. Now remember, far too many leaders limit their goals to what they believe is available. They base their belief on their past experience, their prior wins, their prior losses, their current resources, the current economic outlook, and the people and the identity that they hold on to. And as a result, they've anchored themselves to the past, and they can only see this moment, the present, right now. They're not engaged in forward, visionary thinking. In short, as I said earlier, they're not thinking big. Now, I believe there are three levels of thinking that you and I go through on the road to success. But how far down that road we get to go and how long we get to travel that successful road is going to be based on the quality of our thinking and the corresponding action that follows our thinking. So let's take a look at these three levels of thinking. The first level of thinking is small thinking. Now, this is where you base your thinking on what you currently have, what's currently available to you. This is where you ask questions like, can I afford to do it? Now, it's at this level of thinking that your focus is limited solely on the resources you believe are available to you right now. What it is, it's ultimately a scarcity mindset that's really asking, how can I just survive without losing what I have? Now, to me, this is the level of narrow boundaries and limiting constraints. This is the level of thinking that keeps you where you are, as you are, living life essentially unchanged. Small thinking is characterized by a fear of shortage, and failure is viewed as a costly mistake. Now, the second level of thinking is big thinking. And this is where you're focusing on opportunity, the things that you can accomplish. And it's at this level of thinking that you begin to free yourself from your current limitations and you start to look at what else could be possible. You begin to ask yourself, how do I stretch beyond where I am to get a bigger and a better win? Now, in this second level of thinking, this is the level of boundary stretching. This is when you begin to believe that more is possible for you. And once you believe more is possible for you, you start to gain more wins. You start to boost your confidence and you start to expand your capabilities. Now, big thinking is characterized by a desire for achievement. Failure is seen as a strategic setback, but it's a learning opportunity. But there's a third level of thinking, and that third level of thinking is what I call biggest thinking. It's at this point you stop asking yourself what you can afford or what you can accomplish, and you turn the question inward. And you begin to ask yourself, who must I become? And it's at this level of thinking that you're now focused on transformation. You're committed to daily becoming a better version of who you are and what you do. Now, it's at this third level of thinking that you move beyond just having and doing, and you begin to zero in on who you can become. It's a mindset shift from the external to the internal. It's about cultivating an abundance mindset. Now, biggest thinking to me is the relentless pursuit of excellence through continual transformation. Failure in this scenario is seen as necessary feedback for growth. But remember, when you only focus on big thinking, you could be vulnerable to destination syndrome. Now, this is the limiting belief that when you achieve a goal, you're going to get lasting satisfaction from that. But biggest thinking is going to solve that problem because when you're focusing on transformation, the goal is no longer the prize. The person you're becoming as you journey towards what's next becomes the true valuable reward. And that in itself becomes the prize that you pursue. Because remember, when you improve the quality of your thinking, you improve the quality of your saying, doing, and becoming, and more success becomes possible. You know, in the martial arts, a white belt is simply focused on surviving the next class. The yellow belt is focused on passing the next test. But the brown belt is focusing on finally achieving their black belt so they can be taught at a deeper, more meaningful level. And to take that a step further, the Grand Masters are focused on multiplication. They're asking, how many more black belts can we create so the legacy continues? Now, what I love about this is the quality of instruction didn't change. As each student progresses on the journey towards black belt, what changed and what transformed was their thinking. It was a shift from asking, how quickly can I earn my black belt, to begin to ask, how much can I learn along the way? And the same is true in life. The biggest win in your life isn't the belt that's going to be tied around your waist. It's about the person you're becoming in the process and the person you're still becoming. So, from big to bigger to biggest, this is the journey of black belt leadership. So, as I get ready to wrap up today, I want to take us back to the Great Pyramid of Giza. Every single year, between 14 and 15 million people travel from around the world to journey to Egypt to get on a bus and to go to the Giza Pyramid to visit Khufu's pyramid. On the busiest day, up to 15,000 tourists can be found on the Giza Plateau, and they're there to visit the only surviving relic of the original 7 ancient wonders of the world. But what they see as they stand on the Giza Plateau is a physical representation of a dream, a vision, an idea that began in someone's imagination thousands of years ago. You know, the architects and the workmen who built that pyramid, they've been dead for centuries, but their handiwork remains. So the Great Pyramid of Giza stands as a living testament to the power of a pharaoh who dared to think big. And you've asked me, leadership works the very same way. Great leaders build things that outlive them. And they don't just build buildings. Leaders envision ideas. They develop people. They build organizations. They create cultures, and they leave lasting legacies. Remember, the role of a leader is to equip and train the people who will one day take their place. And when they do that, they're perpetuating their legacy in and through the lives of those people. Now, don't forget this. Your future cannot and will not exceed the size of your thinking. So if all you see are limitations, you're going to live a limited life. But if all you see are opportunities, you're going to live an opportunistic life. And if all you see are today's resources, you're never going to discover tomorrow's possibilities. But if you believe anything is possible, everything is possible to you. Remember this, everything that's ever been created is nothing more than one person who dared to think big and then bigger and take action on that thought. So what would you dare to dream if you knew you could not fail? I'm Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. Thanks for joining me, and have a great day.